Fresh is the word.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host Kelly, K Fresh Frazier. And like always, we have the freshest of guests for you. The guest for this episode is Butcher Bear, the Austin, Texas-based owner of Sect Records, co-founder of the Exploding Drawing events, and drummer in the band Black Mercy. Always donning the full-on bear costume, I go way back with him from the days of my original Renaissance Soul website. I even did an Sect Records podcast mix a while back called The Demon Within. And you can get that at insectrecords.org/podcast. Butcher Bear has always been a huge supporter of Detroit music, having released projects on Sect Records featuring Guilty Simpson, House Shoes, Self Says, Chains, Doc Kim, and Nameless. For as long as we've known each other, this is the first time we've talked at any length, and it was great to finally catch up with Butcher Bear. During our conversation, we talked about his upbringing in Austin, which included a lot of hardcore shows, along with time being in bands and becoming a producer himself. We also get into the conception of Sect Records and his philosophy and how he releases projects, and the creation of the Exploded Drawing events. Butcher Bear is simply just a music nerd and has such a passion for a wild array of genres that he's just always been a blessing to know. We need more people like Butcher Bear in the arts world. So, after a short word from our sponsor, we'll get into this interview, with the homie Butcher Bear. Before we start this podcast, I want to definitely remind you of a sponsor for Fresh is the Word, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams, along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest. In the world of wrestling, where there's hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads, don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. So if you'd like to discuss a possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or even Zubaz, then drop them a line at 20by20apparel.com. That's the number 20x, the number 20apparel.com. And also check out their enamel pin line. It's super cool. All right, welcome back to the Fresh is the Word podcast. And I have a fresh guest with us today. And he's a longtime friend, but this is the first time we're actually ever having a conversation. It's long overdue. He goes by the name of Butcher Bear, and he runs Sect Records out of Austin, Texas, and he's the co-creator of the Exploded Drawing events. And he also plays drums in a punk rock hardcore band called Black Mercy. How you doing, man?
Oh, doing great, man. Thank you for having me on the program.
Long overdue, man. Long overdue. Before we were recording and everything, we were just kind of shooting the shit about some things. And you were telling me how you originally came across my original website, Renaissance Soul. And, first off, let's kind of go back to your upbringing with music and everything, down in Austin, how were you, what kind of kid were you? What were you into, what was sort of your musical upbringing?
Man, I was into, to start with whatever my mom had in the house, which was kind of like compilations of 70s, early 80s, folk. So, there'd be 10 Bob Dylan records, a couple Joan Baez, Joan Armatrading, all the Jones were in there.
All the Jones.
Police, Synchronicity was the first time I ever got to see a girl with her shirt off. I remember that pretty distinctly. But yeah, just those kind of records. The first probably like around like 9 or 10, I started hanging out with like little skater kids in my neighborhood, and that was when I started getting like the Colors soundtrack and Cool Mo D and like first two Public Enemy records, Minor Threat, Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, like that kind of stuff. Bad Brains. And that was probably until I was about like 13 or 14. And that's when I found the Butthole Surfers, who were, they're from Austin, Texas. But also at that time, they were still playing shows in kind of like small, like fucked up, little clubs here. And I just started trying to sneak into every single show I could. Basically, like, I had this whole system where I got my mom to trust me, so she would drop me off, and then I could take a cab home. And then after a year or two of that, I just started running away so I could go see like shows and stay out like all night. And that kind of stuff was like, Butthole Surfers, but also King Coffee, their drummer, had this really awesome label called Trans Syndicate.
Okay.
And all of those bands kind of made up this scene that.
Yeah, talk more about like the scene down in Austin that you were seeing as you were growing up.
Yeah, like probably there's always been shows here, and there's even back then were a lot of like all ages options, but most of them in the beginning would put me at shows that were more like like college rock or like the precursor to what would be like Hootie and the Blowfish or like something like that. Just really fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But I would go to almost any show that I could get into just because I was into it. Like I would go and like watch the drummer and then go home. And at the time I had a drum set. So I would go home and like change my whole drum set around to like however he had his shit set up. And then I would like try to play their stupid music. But eventually, I figured out that there was like hardcore shows, and I went and saw like Guar when I was 12. We got to see The Exploited with Biohazard opening up when I was like 12 or 13. So it changed pretty quickly. Like once I figured out that there was other clubs that I could get into, and then eventually figured out how to get into the, over 18, over 21. I was getting to see like Jesus Lizard the first couple of times that they came down. So it was really in the heat of things that a bunch of things that would later become really fucking huge. And Austin has a huge kind of like psychedelic cowboy history, the Space Cowboys from the 70s. And that's like who my dad was. And that's my mom was like, a part of that community. But like even now, back in the early 90s, like when I was, all these shows that I'm talking about were back then. Like the first couple of times I'd see Fugazi, like I got to see them maybe like 12 times before I was 18, just nice. Because I would go every single time they came. If they would play 3 nights, I would buy tickets to every single show. Blonde Redhead would be opening up, and like Sonic Youth would come through. One of the best shows I've ever seen, just with a Michigan connection, was the Laughing Hyenas opening up for Sonic Youth.
Oh, nice.
And I was like a huge Negative Approach fan. So like when I saw Laughing Hyenas, like I just lost my shit. Like they're incredible. But yeah, like that's the kind of stuff that I was into around then. And I'd say like I started getting more into back into hip hop like in my early 20s, But in the young days, I was hanging out with a bunch of like psychedelic freak punk people, and occasionally going to hip hop shows here and there, like when Public Enemy would roll through, or like House of Pain. That was a really terrible show, but I went to that.
When did you like first start like getting into making music?
Man, like when I was like 10 years old, I convinced my mom to let me start taking drum lessons, and then I was able to get a drum set like a couple years later, and then a couple years after that, I got into a bunch of trouble, and I had to sell the drum set to pay back this trouble I got into when I was 14. But the whole time, basically, I lost my real drum set when I was 14. And I was into all these really experimental bands. So I wound up having 2 or 3 floor toms with like pieces of metal, like just on top of them. I was really into Pussy Galore at the time, like John Spencer's old band. And so basically, you know, I had like, they had like a metal radiator and some springs and just like weird shit. And so when I was like 14 or 15, I just started getting like super dedicated. I was going to learn how to play drums, even if I had like a bunch of this crap to play on or whatever. But pretty much from then, I was making pause tapes when I was 14, just making little beats with like 3 seconds of shit and trying to, you know, you have to look at the tape reset counter and then like acclimate. And then I would play those tapes through a bass amp and then play drums along with that. And then take that tape and put it in the other deck and then play guitar along with that. And just so like that was the early days, kind of before I had a 4-track. And then I started playing in a few punk bands, like kind of right as I was getting into high school, like around there, like 16, 17. My first tour I ever went on, I was 17.
Oh, nice. When did you kind of start taking it seriously and like start building this thing that would eventually be Sect Records?
Man, you know, that I would say in a weird way that the label is probably like my 3rd or 4th life, you know? Like when I started doing that, it was almost from it was like in 2008, I think was the first release. It was inauguration day, or not inauguration day, but it was the vote that got Obama into the White House. That's the first release in 2008. And when I did that, I pretty much had the vantage point of like, I was just done. Like I was at the end of doing like 20 years of stuff. And that was my, not retirement plan, because we don't make any money out of it, but like, you know, it's just like, hey, like this is what I'm going to be into now. I'm not really going to do bands anymore, which completely wasn't true. But at the time, you know, you tell yourselves you're going to do something, and then a year later you figure out that was dumb and you change your mind and you do something else. So it was more of a, I knew how to do it because when I was 18 or 19, my friend was running a label called Little Deputy, and they put out like All You Can Eat and Gomez and like a lot of garage punk bands and also pop punk bands.
Okay.
I think they did like a 45 for Good Riddance like way back then. But at the time, my buddy went out of town for like a couple months, and he asked me, I was always asking him about doing label shit, and he asked me if I wanted to do his mail order. And like, you know, it's totally like, hey, do you want to paint my fence for free or whatever? But I was so stoked, you know, and I went over there, and this is before the internet, you know, so he had like an ad at Maximum Rock and Roll, like that's how he sold records. So it was just like going through these envelopes that had cash like taped into like a corner and in between 2 pieces of cardboard and shit. But that's how I learned about labels, you know, like that's how I figured out kind of not everything at that time, but I figured out who to talk to as far as like knowing what a vendor was, kind of how to put together like a schedule to get the whole thing made on time. And, you know, around 2008, I had like 2 or 3 ideas of things I wanted to put out, but I literally was going to stop at about 7 or 8 releases. That was like my original plan from the get-go. You know, I was going to do a couple things, put out like a couple of my own records, and then that was going to be it, and I would move on pretty much.
What was your reasoning behind that?
Which part?
About doing like 7 records and then calling it quits?
Well, I guess like at the time, it's probably more of just trying to like shield myself from failure, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's easier to like give myself a smaller goal that I feel is like accomplishable, you know? But you know, in hindsight, I think it was also because at the time I didn't I didn't have the ambition or the goals or really a lot of the knowledge I would need to keep doing it after that. So the small projects I had lined up were like a podcast, a CD, like 2 or 3 7 inches, and like that was it. So as far as budget and amount of work it would take to do that kind of thing, that's the part I thought I could get up to that point.
Right.
But I can tell you there was a definitive point where I figured out right at like around '09. I figured out right then that I was like not gonna quit at all, and then I definitely like was gonna do a bunch more stuff.
What
Like I
was that
remember,
point? What was the what changed your mind?
man, it was meeting J1, the deer, Javon
Oh.
Coleman.
Rest in
I don't
peace,
know.
J1, the homie.
Absolutely. Like I don't know if you two ever met. Did
Yeah,
you
man,
guys ever meet?
me and him were starting to become like good friends before he passed away.
Man, that's so dope. Yeah, he was just an incredible guy, and there was one South by where him and he was playing with maybe the Hawthorne Headhunters. He came down with like I said and a bunch of those guys. But Havana Joe, this guy Havana Joe was doing work with Stone's Throw at that
Yeah, I
time.
know Havana Joe. Yo, holler,
Yeah, it's
shout out Havana Joe.
shout out Havana Joe, much love. He called me that sometimes they would hit me up for favors, and I think like they got something delivered to my house, and I was dropping it off at this show. And when I got there, Joe and I knew each other pretty well even then, but he goes, "Hey, this is my friend J1," and then he turns to J1 and he's like, "Hey, man, this is Butch. He has a fucking dope label. Like, you guys gotta work together." And I was just like, literally, like, turned ghost. I was, because I'm looking at all these, guys that I'm a big fan of, and I knew who J1 was because the first Starship was already out there, Starship 27.
Yeah.
His brilliant compilation series he came out with, but the first one was just like a download, up on the net or whatever. So I already knew who he was, and I was pretty embarrassed actually because I was like, I'm not a real label. Like, this is completely misrepresenting me. This guy, I just want to say what's up. But we went in the back, we burned one, like just kind of pounded it out, and it was instant family, man. Just like the amount of just the way that he tasted life and just kind of gave it back to you, even in the very first time I ever met him. Within a week, he had already sent me the track list of the next record he was about to do, which we wound up doing on Sect Records. And at the time, I didn't know anything about distribution. I didn't know anyone at Fat Beats. I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything except I knew that, I had met this amazing person who had this brilliant record with some of, like on that comp that we put out, Starship 27 Volume 2, it's basically like a who's who of people that would go on to be, just super accomplished,
Yeah.
and he just had that vision, and you could see it and hear it as soon as he spoke. So it was that putting that record out completely changed the trajectory of the label and just kind of changed the way that I was thinking about things, like a lot of things that were made possible for that record completely came out of thin air.
What were some of the ideas that you had after that, after that time, what did you start thinking differently about, and what was sort of the results of that?
Well, after that, I just started, in the process of doing that record, pretty much how it went is Jay sent me the music, and then I had to figure out how to get it put out. So I basically just started hitting it. I had heard from somebody else that you could send it to a distributor and then they would possibly put it out, for you, but it's like a big loan and you have to, figure out how to get it all set. And I just started hitting up every single place that I bought records from. And when I hit up Fat Beats, this is a funny story actually, because this dude, he used to work there. I'm spacing on his name right now. He's a really good producer from New York. I think he's also an MC. Anyway, he used to work there. I sent it to him. He hit me back the next day, and he was like, he greenlit the entire thing. I was bowled over. You know, he said all the things you want him to say, which is just like, whatever y'all want, like, we'll cover it. We'll make sure you have enough copies. They'll get out on the date you want, you know, all that stuff. And then on Monday, I get a company-wide email from Fat Beats to like anyone they work with, right? Saying that this guy's fired or he quit. I think he quit. But it was like, I was just like, I called Jay that day and I was like, we're fucked. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, this shit just fell through. I don't know what happened. And then like the next day he sent me an email and he was like, hey man, just in case you're concerned about our deal, like, we're good. Like, you're good. The whole record's good. I was just quitting, and this has all just happened, you know, around the same time or whatever. So it just kind of happened in this weird way, but the whole thing was just educational. You know what I mean? Like, when you're having to collaborate with so many different people, and especially having a record where you have Wajid, House Shoes, Devin Who, Dame Funk, I Said, Ross G, Computer J, Tico's on there. Like, there's just a laundry list of just some of the dopest people, and learning how to navigate a collaboration that big by watching J1 like put all the pieces together was really inspiring. And after that, I just started looking at putting out my own record, and then I was going to put out a couple of my friends' records, and then I started just downsizing and doing tapes. And tapes really were a godsend to me because that's what I came up with in the 90s. Like, we used to buy these little tapes from these acid, you know, drum circle bands or whatever, and so I was pretty well versed in that. And so seeing that come back, and also that made it more affordable for me to keep putting out releases with projects that are basically like, I just started looking at it like I'm putting out artifacts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm releasing this for it to wind up in a fucking resale, like a Goodwill in Jersey, maybe in like 6 years or something. Right. You know,
like somebody's just going through a bunch of shit and they're like, yo, what the hell is this? It looks interesting.
Exactly. And so I just started going towards that instead of trying to figure out how to make anything I was doing accessible for everybody. Because I don't really think that that's like the look necessarily, you know?
Yeah. Extend on that a little bit more about like, what do you look for when it comes to what projects you want to put out, what artists you want to work with?
Man, a lot of it is personal, just how I get along with the artist. And that goes for people that I don't know as well. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people that before we worked together, we didn't know each other. But over the course of doing a project smooth, we'll totally do another record together, you know, that kind of thing. But most of them just come from the music. Like, if I get the tape, or if somebody sends me music, like, I just kind of, I don't want to say there's no special talent, you know, it's just kind of like, I know right away. I know right away about the music, and then typically I will then try to see if we could work together, you know, like if we get along, or if because I think the number one rule to any project is like both people wanting to work together. Yeah. Like, if one person doesn't, it doesn't work. And also it's just a bad vibe. So it's always good to just figure out, like, I think it's great when people figure out how to say no to each other. And then from there, you can kind of figure out like where the yeses are at. And there's a lot of things I've tried to do that just haven't worked out, you know? Like, you're only seeing the ones that have passed the test or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, that's just, for me, it's super personal because it's just such a small little, it's just a little thing, you know. That's part of the name of the label. You know, the inspiration actually is from, you'd appreciate this, but it's actually from that first Fat Cat single, "Don't Nobody Care About Us" that Shoes put out.
Yeah.
That song is actually the inspiration for the Insect Records, the name of the label or whatever.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the releases that you're putting out on Insect, it's like you didn't stick to like one particular genre. Everything's a bit experimental in its own way. You know, what was the sort of the thought behind that?
That's probably just a product of the stuff that I'm into. I also don't think that I'm probably not a good fit to like do something and then just keep doing it and keep doing it, as far as like only doing like straightforward hip hop, or only doing like super whacked out bass music beats or whatever, instrumental hip hop, or even like the hardcore shit, or like the Black Mercy is like that, and the Society of Friends, both bands I play drums in, are like the hardcore shit. And then I put out, you know, a couple like soul kind of records, like the Total Sound Group stuff. But yeah, man, I just think that shit's healthy. You know, like that's what people are witnessing, at least in my case. The label is like, this is it. So like everything you're witnessing is like shit that I'm into, you know, and I'm into a lot of other stuff that like I don't put out just because I don't feel like it like I'm straight up just going for the artifact thing, you know, like I'm into dope beats, I'm into noisy music, I'm into fucking like beautiful female vocals, I'm into like instrumental piano shit, I'm into you know, like Palace Brothers, like that kind of shit. And we're like, this year there's a few things that are coming out that are still like vocals and piano. Like that's it. Like,
See, and that's why I like Insect, man. You like all the weird shit that I like.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I think that's healthy, especially for folks. Like, I totally get like people having like a thing that they do, and that being, you know, a part of the brand or whatever. But I guess like I'm my label is more so a person and less a brand, just because I'm just doing the shit that I'm into, you know. And I'm super. I can't even tell you how grateful I am that anybody checks it out or cares about it. You know, I think it's dope that people support it. You know.
You know, talk about putting out your own records, your own sort of thing, and where the whole Butcher Bear costume thing came from.
Man, the I mean, before the label started, maybe like in '03, my friend Kenneth Holland, he's a brilliant artist. He and I worked together at an X-ray company. And one day he was taking pictures for these crazy shirts he had made. And he was like, here, put on one of these shirts. And then, you know, took my photo or whatever. And then he came back the next day with like a Photoshop version of it. And it just said Butcher Bear on it. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And he was like, this is yours. I made it for you. You can have it. You can use it whenever you want. And maybe that was more like maybe in '01. And I sat on that for probably like 6 or 7 years. And in that time, my friends Reagan and Silton both like, I think like Reason 1 was coming out right then, or like Reason 2. And they just started showing me, like, I spent my whole life in studios and playing instruments, like various instruments, and being a singer in a band and doing all this shit. But then my friends turned me on like to like, yo, you can just do this shit in your room, and like here's all these virtual instruments. And like, so in that time I started making my own shit. And then also in the beginning, you know, I was thinking that maybe if I did some like just stupid shit, like maybe that would help sell records a little bit too. I think that was part of it. Because I didn't really develop like a show until maybe like '09. It was after the label had already started going, but I was already DJing in the suit like before that for record release shows and shit like that. But yeah, man, my friend, I guess that's the way the name came together was from my friend Kenneth, and then my friend Beth Schindler basically made this like, actually my friend Laurel Barrickman drew me, and then my friend Beth Schindler saw that and then made the first suit, and she's made like 5 of them so far. But yeah, that's kind of how the suit and that shit came together. And then the beats and shit, I mean, like, you know, doing my own stuff has just kind of been a mixture of all the pause tape, like weirdo buttle surfer shit, and then, you know, huge fan of Detroit hip hop. You know, like all the crazy part too was figuring out that I could contact people. I think you were one of the first like people that made me realize that I could contact people on the internet.
Yeah.
The internet, you know, that sounds
That's what
weird,
I did.
but it's just like I had like Hotmail, but that's the only, in my mind, that was just the only way on the internet that you could talk to people, and I didn't think that I could just talk to you directly, and that was wild, you know. So the early podcasts, like I put out beat tape for Slaughter and also for Chains, and then I did that 45 with Guilty. The first podcast was with Dakim, which I found out later, like he's actually from Detroit too.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like I think that was like all the Butcher Bear stuff. It was mostly just, you know, to get attention, but it's also, I love the anonymity. It's so nice.
Oh, so, see, and that's,
you know,
another reason why I was drawn to you and what you're doing was because of all that. Because I love things like that. You know, face paint, masks. You know, all
wrestling.
that stuff. I grew up on that stuff, like here in Detroit with, you know, ICP and Twisted and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so I always enjoyed that. You know, so like, when it came around, like this past year with this whole pandemic, like wearing masks was like fun for me.
Right.
And I was even, and when I was looking back on the Insect website, and I was looking back at the podcast I did many years ago.
Yeah, you were a guest. You did a podcast for us.
Yeah, and I'm like, I was like it was like super dark. It was all like dark music. Like
It was so fucking dark. I remember in my mind, I was like, man, what kind of fucking sick Detroit hip hop is he gonna put on here? And you sent me that,
totally
and I was
different.
like, oh, Mind Melter. It's so good though.
That was the thing, though.
It's
like
right up my alley.
that was the thing. Like back then, and probably even right now, if I did it, like my first thought, anytime doing a mix, is like, yo, I'm gonna do all this hip hop stuff. But then when I start looking for stuff to play, I'm like, oh, I'm sick of hearing all these songs because so and so plays them and so plays them, and then I end up going into this total weird place, you know, and that's what happened. Like it always happens when I do that. I always go into like a weird, and I put together like the dark like rap hip hop stuff along with the dark beat stuff, and throw some sort of like you know fuzz metal into it, and I was just like
right.
And I'm like, it just always happens that way, you know. So that's exactly just how I am, I guess.
Yeah, it's killer, man. It was nice to have you be a part of the legacy.
Yeah, man, it was great. I loved it, man. I was like, I remember when you asked me, I was like, hell yeah, man, let's go. All right, yeah, shoot, yeah, I'm ready.
No, man, you've always been such a huge supporter. Like even after the website, like I'd always send you releases, like just downloads and shit. You were always like super responsive. Like hit me up on the chat. Like I thought that shit was dope.
Yeah, man, because you were doing something interesting, and I always liked it, and you supported what I was doing, and it was just like, yo, it was easy that way, you know?
Yeah, it was like almost like Friendster or something.
It was so right now you have like a new tape that's coming out that House Shoes put together. That's kind of like a collection of of old releases from the label. It's kind of talk about like what that is.
Yeah, like it's the first. We're in our 13th year right now, but this tape is basically a mix of songs we put out in the first 10 years from like '08 to 18. But Doc Kim's on there, House Shoes with Jametta, J1, A Better Tomorrow, Lo-Fi, Sound Founder, Doc Kim's group Autopilots. Uh, just, yeah, tons and tons of heat. Chains is on there, Slaughter's on there. But it's just kind of it's things take me so, you can tell that this label is only me if you talk to anyone I've worked with, because some things just take a long time, and especially good things take even longer, you know. And this is like, I think this is a mix that Shoes did like 2 years ago or something like that. And
so it was like, it was actually kind of around the 10-year mark.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was like maybe like 2 months after the 10-year mark or something like that. But I met House Shoes through J1, like around the time the Starship comp came out. And he's I've been a big fan. Like I said, the label's actually inspired by a record he put out, that Fat Cat record, which I in no way thought that I would ever meet him in my life at all. And meeting him through J1, like we became super good friends. And he's just always been a really great guy, but also just a huge supporter of just anything that I've been trying to do in the last, however many years. And so I hit him up just because in my head, that's like the utmost, respect if you can get like a really dope DJ to put together a mix to kind of do not an anthology, but just kind of give people an overview of stuff that we've been putting out. And he said yes, which is fucking killer. And we made like 75 tapes. I think we have like 15 or 16 tapes left or something. It's just like a really tiny release, but it's kind of appropriate of the label. That's kind of shit I do, is just things that don't make sense.
All these years, I'm always on your email list, so I see all the announcements for new stuff that comes out, and also the events that you put on. Kind of talk about your, the inspiration about the events you put on, like, because it looks like it's a very immersive sort of thing. It's very visual along with the music.
Yeah, I do. Me and my buddy Sound Founder do this event series called Exploded Drawing here in Austin, and we're in like our 10th year of doing that. And it's we basically get six either solo, duo, hip hop, experimental, electronic, whatever kind of performers to bring all their little machines and like drum machines, synthesizers, like all that shit, and come and do a performance of like original music. We have six of those people, and then we get two or three visual projection folks. We have two or three people that do it every time, and then we have guests that come. But they'll like light up the floors, light up the ceiling, basically light the whole place up. We buy like tons of beverages that are all free for everybody. It's $5, all ages. Yeah, I mean, it's like pretty no frills. We do it in DIY spaces. We've kind of moved into our newest location, but we haven't done a real show in a year. So recently, we're still actually doing tons of shows on our YouTube page, YouTube, blah, 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 Exploded Drawing. But yeah, man, it's kind of like the ethos of maybe Discord Records or Fugazi mixed into, for lack of a better term, like the beat world or the producer world.
Yeah.
That's been going on. Kind of like I first heard about that stuff maybe in like '04, I think, like '05, when I would read about this thing called Sketchbook that Kutma was doing in Los Angeles. Which was really nothing more than just like a hangout at a bar with a couple friends, like drawing pictures and listening to beats and like burning one in the parking lot. But I used to read, you know, at the same pace I would read your website. I would read about these nights and just be mystified, you know, because we were all on MySpace, and like Sam I Am, Flying Lotus, those dudes were on MySpace just posting these dope, you know, there's all this dope music out there.
Yeah, yeah.
That like didn't have a name, and it wasn't like I was into dubstep and into garage and into like all this shit that was going on in Europe that people over there were taking like serious. Like
Yeah,
they were taking the instrumental music like serious as fuck.
Yes.
And that wasn't happening like before Donuts, like in my mind at least. For, you know, no offense to people that'd say different, but in my mind, like Donuts was the point that made that a thing. You know what I mean? Like people like that was like you were getting to hear something that normally only like a potential MC would get to hear or something like that.
Yeah,
you know,
or like there were just people like that would just do it, but they weren't really putting any effort to get it out there. Like
right, like
like Doc Kim, like he was doing that type of stuff since the 90s.
Right.
Like that weird experimental stuff. He was doing it like he was ahead of his time. He was doing that way before, even before, you know, awesome. Dilla got weird with it, you know. He was doing that stuff, but he would just do it in his basement. Like, and we're all like, yo, I think everybody here was just like, yo, Doc Kim, you need to like push it a little bit more, man, because you're like you're ahead of all these cats, you know. And like also like you know, Tad Mullenix is Dabbery, like he was like, you know, pioneer of all that also, you know. He was way ahead of his time too, you know. But yeah, I know what you're saying, like that like Donuts was something that like really brought it to a kind
like
of
I think now
coolness,
think,
you know.
Right. And I think also now people think of it as maybe like that's the best beat tape, or that's the best instrumental hip hop album, right? They hold that up as like this is the one. But like just with the way I remember it, I just think it's even more fantastical than that, because like that wasn't even a thing.
Right.
You know, at least, you know, in my world, like I was a huge followed Stone's Throw, followed all that shit. And they took that and made it a thing after that, after they saw that it could be a thing. But like all these like beat records and library records and all this shit that people see now, like that just wasn't like viable in that same way. You know, like people weren't trying to make a whole producer record. Like I know, like I was a big fan of Blink 47, like Wajid's site.
Yeah.
And, you know, he put out this, what was that lady's? He put out this tape with this woman's name. She was like the Rockefeller's daughter. I can't remember. Anyways, this dope beat tape. But you know, it was like 20-minute kind of snippets.
Oh yeah, the Patty Hearst joint.
Yes, the Patty Hearst joint.
Yeah, the Patty Hearst, like yeah.
That's the thing, is those little things were out there, but it wasn't like a record. You know, like
because when you go from like at the end of like the 90s, like from the 90s until the beginning of like the early aughts, like producers were popular based on who they were producing with, you know.
Right.
Like they would produce for somebody, but like it moved from like those same producers could eventually just do projects of their own, you know, and didn't have to deal with rappers. Now we're in a time where we hardly know who the producer is for rappers.
That's true. Yeah.
And they just come and go, you know. But before, you know, if you heard Dilla produce a joint on an album, you're like, oh snap, yo.
Right.
It's crazy. You know, speak more about like you know, your other projects, you know, the hardcore bands that you're a part of.
So I used to play in a band called Society of Friends, and then this newer band I'm in is called Black Mercy. It's basically me and 4 guys that used to play in other hardcore bands when we were younger. We've never been in a band together, but our singer Noble is like the guy who, whatever band he was in, like all of us would go and see them because he's just like that dude. Like, I think he takes capoeira like 2 or 3 times a week now, and he's like older than me by a couple years. You know, like he's just insanely like has his shit together and is still straight edge after all these years and shit like that.
I like that Black Mercy record you put out. It's great.
Thanks, man. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's just kind of like, to me, it's a throwback, but the funniest shit is like, this is what's going on, at least around here. Like, hardcore is coming back. Like a lot of the things that we were into and doing before, like tape culture, like fucking, you know, DIY in general, is dope. You know, people are fucking really making like some badass records and really kind of, at least here, you know, kind of moving the culture and getting like kind of away from I don't know, man. Part of the label and part of just me in general is I really like to have things be even, or have the entry point be really low. You know, it's kind of like exploded drawings, $5, and it's all ages. Like that's taken from the Fugazi shows, like back in the day. It didn't matter like where they played, what city they played. It was gonna be $5, all ages.
Yeah, how important was that for you? Because that's how you grew up, going out to shows, these all ages shows and whatnot. Doesn't matter what it was, to be able to do that yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like that's everything to me. I mean, definitely, I'm not one of those people that's like, if it's not all ages, I won't play it. Like I'll play any place, you know. Like I'm just a regular person vibes on that. But as far as the things that like I want to make happen, like I definitely with Exploded like looked at the concept as being like kind of high art, you know, like literally, figuratively, whatever. Like it's just, you're gonna get a fucking huge sound system, have people zone out to like some visuals, like buy some records, just kind of like mainly it's like 80% producers hanging out. So it has a lot more to do with like, you know, we're getting like 300, 400 people at a time. And if half of them don't know each other, chances are like they'll probably get to know each other.
Yeah, and then boom, like they could start working together, you know, just like connecting the dots and having like a really cool place to do it.
Absolutely. And I think also like producers are fucking weirdos. And,
of course,
you know, it's kind of like people that are really consciously thinking about creativity and shit like that. And it's just great getting everyone together. But also like, it's hugely important for me to have that $5 marker is like just enough to make sure people give a shit. But then we give away all the drinks and we make sure that nobody has to spend any more money. Like, it's just about like being there, hanging out, and like vibing out and enjoying the music. Like I grew up like pretty poor when I was young until like we weren't living in like a solid house till like maybe I was like 12 maybe. And so it's just really important because I was that kid trying to like sneak out, go to shit, didn't have any money, but like I wanted to check it out. And those kind of things, those structural things, like really fucking matter. You know, like I think a lot of people think about like how much money they can make and the bottom line, and all of those things are fucking valid as fuck, you know, like, yeah. And I support people like following that because I'm on that sometimes too. But I mean, a lot of the times, especially with Exploded, we're mostly funded by the city of Austin. So we're really fortunate that we don't need to feel like money is the most important thing because the taxpayers are paying us to
oh, nice.
You know,
okay.
throw these like freaky fucking parties for people. But also it's a really good way to open up people to things that they otherwise would not ever seek out, you know? And the label's one way that I do that. Exploded Drawing is another. But yeah, for some reason that shit's really important to me, and it has been for as long as I've known that I could do that. Like before, I was just kind of like making mixtapes for myself and shit, you know?
Yeah.
The progression just comes with like kind of giving a fuck and then seeing if you can do it, you know?
like getting back to like the hardcore records and everything.
Oh yeah.
Like what you were kind of explaining is something that I really like have seen recently because with my Renaissance Soul podcast, I'm also doing I'm working on doing a like a Twitch show where I like play and explain obscure Detroit records. So what I've been doing is I've been shopping for old like old records that nobody knows about, and I've been finding a lot of like hardcore records from the Detroit area, and
Awesome.
and they're fascinating because they're like totally DIY, and you get like they stuff them with so much like flyers and stuff.
Yeah.
that you know everything that's going on with that band and the label just by that release, and it's like amazing.
Yeah. No, it's crazy, and like that's kind of the cool, like all the things about Black Mercy, at least to me, are like nostalgic. Like it's not like brain surgeon music. Like a lot of people could play it. The packaging and shit is like almost the exact same way that we used to do it back in the day.
Yeah.
You just buy a stamp that shit, like number it up. Just like everything's simple, and just the energy of the music. And also the biggest thing about it for us is because all of us have put out like multiple records and a bunch of hardcore bands. So like, it's not about really that, but it's just about being immersed in that culture and also being able to like re-experience it like through like the new way that it is. I don't know, it's a weird feeling, you know what I mean? Because like we're playing shit tons of like house shows, we're playing at fucking skate ramps, we're playing like just like those are the only shows that really that we try to accept, like especially like now that fucking there's a petri dish like everywhere you go or whatever.
Yeah.
But all of these things I'm talking about are pre whatever the fuck is going on, obviously, because we haven't been doing that much shit in the last year. But yeah, man, like that's kind. It's just fun as fuck, man. Like that's just like, and I will say, like, out of all the things that are a hobby of mine, like drums are my first instrument and just kind of the funnest shit for an old guy to be doing. It's playing fucking hardcore music, and like it's just really hilarious seeing like 18-19-year-olds like just hate on us like while we're setting up and shit. They're just like, this is gonna suck, like you guys are fucking old and whatever. And then like we bro down afterwards in a hardcore stance. But no, it's fucking dope, man. Like it really is. It's just like, it's super fun. And I think a part of it was I wanted to make sure and like show my son that I could actually do something that wasn't like, a record player, like a drum machine or something.
Right.
He's 5, so I'm trying to like, he's got to remember this shit.
Right, he's gonna start remembering that stuff. I that's like around 5-6 years old was when I started like really like gravitating towards specific things, in music.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's like my earliest things I can remember, So he's really gonna start like, really like remembering that stuff.
Yeah, we'll see what my kids remember. I'm sure it will be either horrifying or enlightening.
It'll be all the stuff that they can make fun of you later on.
Exactly. And see, Jack's like involved in the Exploded Drawing YouTube shows now. So that way I'll be able to make fun of him too, just in case there's any,
That's great.
But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else to tell about Black Mercy, but it is like super fucking, it's really fun. Like it's just an absolute blast. Do you have another record coming out? Like,
oh yeah, I was gonna ask, like, do you have plans to do more Black Mercy records in the label or any other hardcore bands?
Probably not any other hardcore bands, but definitely we're going to do one more Black Mercy record, and I think somebody else is going to do one too.
I'll definitely be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, man, we're talking about we're going to be shooting some videos pretty soon, I think. is what we're gonna do. We're talking about just going out to a field with a generator and just playing out there to like nobody, or doing something like that.
Sweet, sweet. So like, you've been able to, keep this label, alive for like 13 years now. Um it's just something that's very personal to you. It's not making you rich or anything, but like what really, when it comes down to it, why do you keep still doing it, and what keeps it alive?
Man, the weird part is like thinking about labels being alive or not alive. That shit is like interesting to me because I think before I started doing a label, I literally thought that it was just like an unattainable feat, or like there was like maybe, when you don't know how to do anything, it seems ridiculously it just seems out of reach, and I think once I figured out that I could actually do stuff, like I just started, it's just kind of become like a compulsion, like in all the bands that I was in, maybe save for like one or two, I was the guy who called everybody, like before there was text. Like I was the guy who would make sure that you were going to be there on time, or
Yeah.
if you needed the tape that had the song on it before we showed up, like I was going to drop it at your house like the day before to make sure you had enough time. Like I don't know, I've just always been the person who takes care of shit, or like has to talk to the dude about getting money at the end of the night, or has to drive because everyone's fucked up, or like just that's just been my role. And there's a lot of things that go into doing a record label that I think are similar to that. There's a lot of the things, the reasons to keep doing it sometimes are just because life is short, man. Life is fucking short. It's shorter than you think it is. And I'm not telling you like you, Kelly. I just mean the proverbial.
Yeah, no, definitely.
People out there, that's my belief, is that we always are going to think that we have more time than we don't. And the worst things that have ever happened to me in my life, I can almost all of them, I can remember the day that it happened, and that everything else was going just fine before the really terrible shit happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that as like I'm fucking frightened and I'm just flailing. It's just more of an appreciation for when you recognize that you have an ability to do something. It's on you whether you want to pursue that or not, and no one is really going to give a shit. Like it's about your love of the thing, and that's what really drives me, is just being able to come up with an idea, and then I pick 2 or 3 of my friends and then ask them if they want to collaborate, and then just see if we can put something together. Like that's how some ideas come together. Or somebody will hit me up and say, hey, I have a dope record, like what do you think we can do with it? And those little things turn into bigger things as far as like friendships, and they become a part of your life, and you wind up knowing people that you've worked with for 15, 20 years. And it just means a whole lot to me, like the whole process. I'm a nerd for records. I'm a nerd for tapes. And, I've been reading liner notes since I was like 13, trying to figure out who like Don Zientara at Inner Ear in DC is, because he recorded like 85% of the Discord records, and he's like this old square dude. Like, how did it happen? That shit really matters to me.
Right, I feel you.
And the label part of it is just like such a fun, funny, weird thing to be a part of. Like the Autopilots record's like one of the best releases I've ever put out, in my opinion. There's a label, I forget, it's called Cabbages Hip Hop. I'm probably getting that wrong, but they just did like a post about it. The record came out in like 2014. This guy just figured out that it's Kim, and like he's just putting all the names with the faces.
Yeah.
And he posted it last week, and it made me so fucking happy. Like just the fact that it's like, it's these artifacts, and the crazy that nobody like Dakim has gotten considerably a lot bigger and more well known since that record's come out, and nobody took that record and then tried to say, hey, and this is Dakim's record over here too. It's just like it naturally found this weird post that went up of this guy that's like, I can't believe I've been listening to this record. Now I figured out who it was. And like, I just remember that feeling for myself with records, and the fact that like I'm somewhat like a small part of that is like dope, you know? And like when that record came out, I sent Kim all of his copies to San Francisco, right? It's like a 12-inch box full, like 60 records, 75 records, something like that.
Yeah.
Send it to him. I'm looking at the tracking. I see it was delivered. I call him and I say, hey man, you get those records, everything cool? And he's like, actually, it's not fucking cool. And I was like, yo, what? Like, what's going on? I'm paraphrasing, so don't hold me to this, but he was not happy, right? I asked him what happened. He says the box that got there is filled with what presumably someone's stolen mail. It's a bunch of different addresses and like a urine specimen cup. And it's like, it's a 45 box now. It's smaller. So basically like the records went to San Francisco. The way I taped the label was like a piece of paper with tape over it, right?
Yeah.
They lifted the whole thing and put it on this box with like a urine sample and then put that to Dakim's house. Those records were stolen and never found. So
holy
like,
shit.
yeah, just like weird shit like that happens. Like you can't make a record more limited than that. Just fucking have a bunch of them stolen and replaced with like some stolen mail and shit. So Doc had thought for a second that maybe I had sent him that shit intentionally, you know, like he was like, what the fuck? And then, you know, after talking a little bit, he was like, holy shit, yeah, I don't know how this happened. This is fucked up, you know, and getting like someone else's urine, that's fucking disgusting. Like,
wow, that was crazy.
Yeah, this is weird. But yeah, man, those kind of things, and like the small, it's always a success when a unknown artist, when we do a couple things and then they're known after that. It doesn't mean I had, you know, I didn't do it, they did it, but it's still cool to just be a part of that. You know, when I was coming up, I had a few people reach out and like show me shit, like really show me and like teach me like how to do things a certain way. And that's how I pay it back. You know, a lot of working with artists has a lot more to do with just educating them on how to do all this shit for themselves, you know?
You know, as we kind of wind down, like what do you kind of have, like, you know, what does the future have in store for you? Is there anything that you haven't done thus far that you would like to do? You know, what do you, you know, just see that you want to do in the future?
Man, I'd love to, like, in the last, like, year or so, I've been a lot more focused on trying to do some more collaborations with MCs. So definitely would love to do, you know, a record with somebody or a couple of somebodies. And then also another Black Mercy record. I think probably we're going to keep doing these exploded drawings on YouTube probably until 2022. I'm really stoked to, like, come back with that. But as far as shit I haven't done yet that I want to do, I mean, I recorded like 165 interviews last year, like right at the beginning of the pandemic. Like I got on Instagram every night and like just interviewed as many people as would say yes. And I've been slowly editing this shit, and I've only put out like 4 of them. So that's one thing I'd kind of like to focus on, is just getting them out there. But I've been trying to learn Final Cut as much as possible and just, you know, fuck with video shit a little bit more. But yeah, man, I've been the other thing, probably like a long form. The next record I do is gonna have some kind of like 20-minute movie video type thing associated with it. We just did this one for Nameless called Chips the Movie that's coming out on April 16th. But yeah, it's Shoes mixing the whole Nameless record, 30-second bumps like back to back to back. And then a friend of mine from here, Orion Garcia, he's part of the Pelagrosa DJ crew, but he's also like a phenomenal digital artist. He put together this like 13-minute like fucking movie, Chips the movie. But yeah, man, I've been getting really into shit like that, and then I'm playing drums like fuck ton. Like I got this little fucking. How does the internet work? Hold on. Yeah, over. It's like backwards, so I don't get it. Okay, there's a little kid's drum set.
Oh yeah,
there,
I see. Yeah.
behind my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you probably can't see it, but this painting and this are the same painting.
Yeah.
And this, it's actually the oh here, my shit's not plugged in. Hold on. Yeah, this is the original artwork for Madlib, Come On Feet.
Okay. Oh yeah. All right.
And then this is the other side of it.
Nice.
But yeah, he's the homie. He's done by Aaron Guadamus. He's done a couple record covers. He did the Georgia Dudley record, and he also did the new Paralisium Cantos record. But yeah, man.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. You know, good luck with everything as always, man. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you, K-Fresh. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing, man. You're still turning me on to new shit all the time. I really appreciate it.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. You know, before we get out of here, where can people go online to get more information about Sect Records and everything that you're up to?
Man, everybody can go to insectrecords.org, and if you want to see what I'm up to, I'm always on Instagram, Butcher Bear or Butcher_Bear. There's Insect Records on there. All those places, just type it into the machine.
Thank you for listening to the Fresh is the Word podcast, hosted and produced by myself, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier, empowered by Anchor at anchor.fm/Fresh is the Word. Fresh is the Word theme music provided by Steve O. You can find more of his productions at iamsteveo.bandcamp.com, and that's EYEAMSTEVEO.bandcamp.com. Fresh is the Word is available on all major streaming platforms. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. If you want to support Fresh is the Word, please consider pledging via Patreon at patreon.com/freshistheword. Follow Fresh is the Word on social media on Twitter at Fresh is the Pod, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Fresh is the Word. For more information about Fresh is the Word and our other podcasts, Breaking Records and Renaissance Soul, and a collection of pop culture articles and reviews, please visit freshithepodcast.com. Thank you for listening and your support. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.